a piece of legislation, working all the time, as Nikki said, with the Prostitutes Collective, because all the public activity has to really be fronted by sex workers. We got it in the ballot for the members' bill. It was drawn out. We had a pretty tumultuous 2.5 years passage through the Parliament. They got really tight at the end after a more conservative Parliament was elected, and in June 2003 finally the legislation got through by 60 votes to 59, which I would claim a time for close political management. Very important. So it was an intense process. I think we were lucky in two respects. Trafficking issues, which are now considered to be much more crucial and have to be addressed in any campaign around sex work, were not so much an issue in New Zealand. They weren't voiced so strongly, and indeed the evidence afterwards is that there has been a decrease in trafficking so far as with ever evidence of trafficking before. And I think secondly, the religious opposition was so bizarre and so extreme and so illogical that helped us to actually win the case. So if I think with my political hat on, we weren't too rushed, and it's important in politics to take your time. We had the evidence, and it's always important to have the facts to actually present a case. We had New South Wales, an Australian state, next door to us, which had done much the same thing, though I think we did it better, as New Zealanders normally do. So we had evidence on the ground of how it could work to actually build on. We had already, in terms of HIV, we were the first country to decriminalise the provision of needles, clean needles, to people with an intravenous drug habit, and we'd also decriminalised gay sex both in the 1980s. So this was unfinished business in terms of HIV, and I think the HIV arguments are important in this environment. In South Africa, where the latest figures indicate 1 in 5 new HIV infections are related to sex work, is clearly profoundly important. So don't forget the HIV arguments. This is unfinished business from the 80s here in that respect. Sex workers' voices being at the front meant arguments really difficult. It's hard to argue with sex workers saying, here is our experience, and here is what we want to do, and here's how the law should be. It takes a pretty arrogant politician to deny the reality of that lived truth, even though many might try. As I said, the opposition was quite marginalised. It linked to New Zealand's history of emancipation of women, the first country for women to get the vote, strong on public health, etc. So it's always good to tell that story. And we also, fairly late on in the process going through Parliament, we built in a review process, and that review meant 5 years after the bill went through, 2008, there was a review committee report which is on the New Zealand Ministry of Justice website, and that basically proved that the earth hadn't fallen in. The guy who said that all the volcanoes in New Zealand would explode the day that sex work was decriminalised was proven to be absolutely wrong. And the review basically said the effect of criminalisation is severe. And I see that also, I think, in the gay community if you go back. But it takes time, it takes a generation for the behaviour of sex workers and police and others to change. But there were clear signs that the story was going well, and along the way sex workers were being empowered. Indeed, in a country like England, where the law is so poor, and South Africa, where the stories, if anything, are even more horrendous. So the police-sex worker relationship was transformed. I remember a murder in my electorate soon after, a murder of a sex worker, soon after the law went through, and the other side accused me of being complicit in her murder because I'd supported DECRIM, which shows the mindset. But anyway, her family from the United States, they came over, the case was solved quickly, and the family came to see me and said, the amazing thing is that if she'd been killed in the States, she'd have been treated like dirt by the police. Here she'd been treated with honour and respect. And that was what they learned about the difference between criminalisation and decrim. So it's important to follow through the rationale of what actually happens when things go wrong, as they will around sex work. Of course, the arrests stopped. In New Zealand they weren't great, about 500 a year. We discovered, eventually getting the figures out of the police when we were on the parliamentary committee, that the arrests were mainly of men, and mainly of Maori and Pacific men. It was the transgender men on the streets who the police were picking on all the time, and that's the link between homophobia and this fight, that the police tend to use their powers to have a go at the groups who they are most alienated towards, and that's where, to me, the arguments all link up together. There is evidence of a move from the streets into safer locations, certainly in Wellington, the capital city. There's evidence of less stigma, and also, as I mentioned, with decriminalisation and the improved police-sex worker relationship, there's more light in the dark corners of the sex industry. It's in everyone's interest that trafficking is uncovered, and that makes it possible to happen. Now, it is extraordinary if you just think of to me, the kind of key incident here in the last few years, the murders of the sex workers in Ipswich, of just how wrong the political reaction was to that. Absolutely extraordinary that the law which resulted from the debate after that was the law that would actually make it more possible for that to happen again. And if we're going to learn anything from these kind of debates and discussion, it's actually trying to make sure our political system works to deal with problems and not make them worse because of being driven by ideology. Just wanted to finish with one quote. It's from, we had a big drama in South Africa 2 weeks ago. We thought we had decrim supported by the cabinet there, and at the very last minute they changed their minds. And this is a quote from the leading HIV clinician, a medical doctor in South Africa. On World AIDS Day, December the 1st, the public bleat about stigma, human rights, and hug the person next to you. Yet one of the groups most marginalised, unprotected, and affected by this HIV epidemic faces harassment, rape, needless exposure to HIV and other illnesses, all a direct consequence of the current legal framework. The denialists, the conservatives, and the non-public health idiots have won the debate. Those are powerful words, and this, I think, is an issue that needs powerful words and clear thinking. I read recently the Dean of the Cathedral, St Paul's Cathedral, resigned last month saying he could imagine that Jesus could have been born at this camp. That may not yet have happened, who knows, but it would be so appropriate if a successful campaign for decriminalisation of sex work in England was born here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. That was very informative, and we really appreciate your dedication to decriminalisation. Can I just ask the people to come forward?